welcome to all our viewers. My name is Divya and I'm a physiotherapist. I'm working at PlayStreet.
And I am Manisha, a physical therapist working at PlayStreet.
PlayStreet is an organization that provides educational services to help children with special needs become independent and live up to their potential. We offer parent empowerment programs, an integrated schooling program, and a variety of clinical services.
In recognition of Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month, our focus is firmly set on profound significance of dyspraxia. We aim for this series to shed light on the complexities of dyspraxia, address specific hurdles people with dyspraxia faces, and raise awareness and importance within the neurodiversity movement.
Today, we are on the 10th talk of our series under the segment which focuses on visible effects of dyspraxia. The topic for today is impact of dyspraxia on posture, gait, balance, and coordination. Today, we have Dr. Joni among us, and we are very honored to have her with us to share her valuable thoughts and information on the same.
Dr. Joni Redlich is a physical therapist, author, and owner of Kids PT. She has focused on using children's strength, curiosity, and learning styles to help them meet their goals throughout her career. She focuses on the whole child and believes that every child has unlimited potential. She is an author of Turn Stumbling Blocks into Building Blocks, a book that helped parents and other therapists from all over the world help children be all they can be.
Dr. Joni, we are very grateful that you have taken time out of your schedule to share your knowledge about this topic. Would you like to share any thoughts to our viewers before we get started with the questions?
Well, thank you for having me. This is a topic that I've been passionate about for 24 years, basically since I started my career as a physical therapist, and one that I'm glad to engage in this conversation with you today.
So then let's get right into the questions. So firstly, Dr. Joni, we would like to know from your perspective as a physiotherapist working with the children, how would you describe dyspraxia and its impact on the children with special needs? And we are very keen to hear from your professional insight and experiences about these challenges.
So dyspraxia is often one of those overlooked areas of need for children with autism because it's not obvious compared to someone that has a primary physical disability. So our children with autism are often struggling with movement and learning new novel movements. And that really impacts development because what is development but constantly learning new movements? So it really often gets overlooked. It's often blamed on things like behavior. So it's often looked at that the child is choosing not to do whatever movement it may be. It can be something as simple as standing from a chair when we're moving from one classroom to the next in a school. And that may look like a child is not following directions, but they often have a really hard time initiating movement, starting and stopping. So if you give someone a direction and they look to you like they can get up and move, and when you tell them to, they're not listening, often the quick assumption is it's a behavior, they're not listening. But often it's the dyspraxia piece that is really impacting these children's lives and is creating so much frustration in them. What a lot of autistic adults have described it as is that the message from the brain to the body, there's some kind of disconnect. And so I've listened and learned a lot from adults that are sharing their experiences to learn more about what our children are experiencing. And so really dyspraxia can impact, it's basically a subset of our autistic children that are really impacted by the dyspraxia that's impacting their motor planning, which affects their daily activities from the moment they wake up till they go to bed at night. And that leads to a lot of frustration.
Yes, yes. Actually, we've noticed that frustration many times in our children. That makes sense.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joni. And we would like to know little more about importance of posture in sensory processing and regulation. What are some common challenges that individuals with dyspraxia face regarding their posture?
There are so many pieces when it comes to posture where if you look at a child, often if they're sitting up really tall and they're always staying up really tall, often they're in this anxiety, fight or flight place. And then we have our children who are the opposite, who are always kind of slumping down. Those are the kids we're telling them sit up tall, sit up tall. But those are the kids that are at that low arousal. So whether a child is sitting up really, really tall or is always in that kind of C shape and their muscles are just not activating, all of these children are not getting full deep breathing. They're not getting their systems activated. So when you have those kind of insecure postural system, when it's not fully activated, it impacts everything from the sensory perspective. You're not getting accurate visual information. You're not getting accurate vestibular information, and you're not getting as much somatosensory information as you otherwise would. So these are children that these systems are already not giving them enough information. A lot of our autistic children have dyspraxia and also have low tone. So with the low tone, they're not getting as much somatosensory information telling them where their bodies are. And then when we are having our postural system impacted, our visual vestibular system is not giving us as much information. So when we see our autistic kids with dyspraxia walking around and seeming like they're floating through space, they kind of are. They are not feeling grounded and they're not getting all the sensory information that a neurotypical child is, but the same expectations are being put on them. So that's where there's often that mismatch of they are not feeling grounded and ready to kind of, respond the way another child is, and they're focusing a lot on compensations.
That makes a big difference of how we think also, because we always constantly have this thought that why isn't the sensory issues being related to posture. We actually have a difficulty to explain this relation for the parents, like there are postural issues that might lead to sensory and vice versa. So actually it gave a lot of information for our viewers now. And Dr. Joni, I want to know about the gait as well and how it is affected in the children with autism and dyspraxia. And what is the impact of having an incorrect gait or an improper gait?
So a lot of our autistic children have an atypical gait. If you walk around a school for autistic children, you will observe every single child has some degree of an atypical gait. And it may look, there's different, some kids are toe walking, other kids have a very kind of wide, almost immature base of support. And that's what I see with a lot of these children. So they become walkers, typically, around the same time as their peers, some a little later, but then those walking skills don't mature into an age appropriate walking pattern. So that's where that dyspraxia of we've gained a skill, but moving into maturing that skill with mature postural control, they often get a little stuck. So they may look more like a toddler gait. So that walking, the wide base of support stays. Instead of developing a nice smooth arm swing, the arms may stay elevated in like a low guard or medium guard. All of those skills, the rotation doesn't kick in, but then the bodies are getting larger and they have to find some kind of momentum to move. And so that's where a lot of kids think toe walking is a great solution. So, and then they get locked in that pattern, and then that sticks often for a long time, if not forever. So our kids are compensating, they're looking for solutions. They're not like adults. Adults have to be taught solutions. Children will problem solve and they will find what works for their bodies and what uses the least amount of energy. And so that's how our children are going to move from point A to point B no matter what. They want to move and they're going to, but they're going to just pull in different compensations. And what happens when their gait is impacted, it impacts their balance. Often they are really good at moving and moving fast, but it's really hard to move slow or stand still. And so if you look at what happens to your development of your attention skills, if you're constantly moving, you don't have the opportunity to gain attention skills. You get really good at, I'm moving and I'm moving. So my attention's here, then my attention's here, then my attention's here. But it's really hard to stay still. So it's really hard to develop those attentional skills. And so that's where it really impacts so much beyond how a child's moving.
Actually,
And
that
how does the dyspraxia influence the development and maintenance of getting a proper gait pattern? When they have this atypical gait pattern, does dyspraxia influence getting them into a typical gait pattern?
Yes, because learning any new movement pattern is really hard. So it is very hard to make those changes because the message from the brain to the body is atypical. So doing something new and different is difficult. It is possible. So with intervention, it is absolutely possible, but it's really hard for these kids to do it on their own.
Thank you so much, Johnny, for explaining why the kids are doing that rather than what is the reason behind. Thank you so much for that. And we would like to know a little more in deep about what role does the balance play in having physical and emotional well-being. What are the specific difficulties someone with dyspraxia might encounter when it comes to maintaining balance?
So children with dyspraxia often have a hard time developing their equilibrium reactions from early on. Sometimes they can kind of compensate and hide it until they now need to do higher level skills. So they've attained those kind of infancy first year milestones. But when it comes to those higher level skills of now, let's say keeping up with friends on the playground, all of a sudden that's where it's really impacting them. So if our children, let's say we have a child with dyspraxia who is walking on their toes, they're really also not using their ankle balance reactions to be able to use their balance. And that's our first line of defense with our balance. So if they can't access that, they're not using that, they have to go to the next level, which means they're always having to have a larger reaction to any kind of perturbation that's impacting their balance. Same thing with that overall postural system. If it is hard to know where your midline is and it's hard to shift your midline in both directions equally, then it's really hard. You're not getting accurate sensory information into your body. And then it's really hard to react to, let's say, a perturbation. So a child runs past you in the playground and bumps into you. How are you going to respond instantaneously? So with our kids who are always moving, it's hard to get, just like I said, it's hard for them to develop attention. It's hard for them to develop static balance because they're always moving almost like a slow controlled fall in space.
So now when you explain so much in detail about balance and about the gait, I would like to know about the coordination as well. What role does coordination have in the individuals of dyspraxia and how difficult can it make their daily activities?
So coordination is very challenging for children with dyspraxia. It's kind of the foundation, almost, definition of what dyspraxia is. So for our children who are having trouble with their postural system, they're also having atypical sensory processing, and then they're trying to figure out how to time their bodies to learn a new task. They get really stuck. So that's where the coordination for daily activities, the motor planning of it is often what's really hard. And so different children will have a different impact with it. So with some children with dyspraxia, it's the coming up with the plan, the ideation that is really hard. So I know I want to, butter this jelly on this toast, but I have to first come up with that I need a knife. Then I have to pick it up. And then how do I move my arm to do that? So the children generally know what they want to do, but how do they come up with a plan to do it? And so other children are impacted more by the timing and the sequencing and the motor execution of it. So do I pick up that knife first and then do I spread it? We take it for granted that that's an easy thing, but for our children with dyspraxia, sequencing these things are very, very difficult. Other children really struggle with the timing of the muscles. So they got, okay, I need a knife. I'm going to put it in that jelly and now I want to spread it on my toast. But the actual spreading, coordinating the muscles to do the motion is where they're stuck. So that's where these children really need therapists to break things down, look for what is the area of trouble that that individual child is struggling with, and then come up with both accommodations, but also working on the skills.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Johnny. And as we are speaking individually about the coordination, balance, posture, and the gait, can you give us the typical signs or the indicators that suggest the people with dyspraxia might be facing these difficulties?
So I'd say the biggest sign is just seeing frustration during daily activities. So it could be getting dressed, it could be bathing, but it's just frustration and often what a parent may see as an overreaction during their daily routines. And again, this was where it often gets kind of looked at, there's a behavior problem. And then sometimes it then gets looked a little more, maybe there's a sensory problem, but often there's a dyspraxic problem where there's a motor component to it. So that frustration in daily life, and then often very big feelings that are connected to that. So that's often a big thing. When it comes to gait, not seeing it progress beyond that kind of new walker look, or the children walking on their toes. So those are kind of the two versions that we see very commonly in kids with dyspraxia. And then also the constant movement. And again, that gets often assumed that it's an attention piece, that they're always moving, or they're just really strong and active. And you need someone to pick apart and take a look at when they're not moving, can they actually control their bodies? So those I'd say are the three big areas that are, red flags that there may be dyspraxia that the child's dealing with.
Wow, this actually can make the parents' work a bit simpler because instead of worrying what can be the reason, knowing the red flags will make their work easier. So thanks for this important knowledge, Dr. Joni. And do you think that the posture, gait, and balance, all of these things which you were talking about, have impact on speech, communication, and social engagement? If yes, then how does it impact?
Absolutely. It has a very strong impact. We talk about that its communication is from head to toe. So whether it is the postural system from controlling your respiration or the postural system from controlling your emotional regulation and your attention. Also, if you are trying to just control your body and not fall and as you're moving through space, how are you going to focus on interacting and playing with another child? So I always describe it as many of our dyspraxic children, their energy is being sucked up by trying to control their bodies. And that really impacts their ability to focus on higher level skills like learning. So the body is taking a lot of that cognitive function. And if the body can get more automatic and the children don't have to worry about what the body is doing, then they can put their focus on higher level skills like communication, like learning, and social interaction.
What kind of interventions can we use like as physios in our sessions? So speech, the impacted effect of posture, balance, and all these effects on speech can be worked on.
So I always recommend looking at the sensory pieces first. So making sure the children are at that calm alert state before you try to intervene from a communication point of view. And then it's not a static process. So it's not, okay, I've done my sensory thing first, and now we can move on. You need to check in throughout the entire session. And are they still in that calm alert state? Are they still focused? Are they still ready in that ready to learn place? Or do I need to go back and integrate some more sensory things? I also find that I've said for years that the children talk more in PT and OT than in speech. What are we
Yes.
doing differently? And they're moving. They are moving their bodies. And so over the past 10 years, most of the speech therapists I work with, they get that too, and they're now moving with the kids. So not, speech therapy does not need to be sitting at a table practicing things. It can be natural movement and combining that with speech. So especially our children with dyspraxia, if we can have them experience a concept, so we, instead of looking at a picture and let's say the ball is on a house. Okay, where's the ball? Is it on? Is it over? Is it under? Well, can we jump on something? Can we jump over something? Can we crawl under a bench? Can we crawl through a tunnel? So all of our children learn better when they're experiencing it from a whole body perspective. But for our dyspraxic children, they're still trying to map out their bodies. So until they've mapped out their bodies, it's hard to then go abstract and learn these concepts from an abstract point of view. So I always recommend integrating sensory, integrating movement, taking that whole body perspective, because things are just so much more effective that way.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joni. Actually, this answer will give most of the answers for the therapist as well as parents why the physical therapy or occupational therapy is important, same as the speech therapy. Thank you so much for sharing this information. And we would like to know a little more about how does these challenges evolve in an individual with dyspraxia growing older or reach different developmental stages.
So they used to think that dyspraxia would just get better over time. So parents would be told, it'll get better, don't worry. And the research says the complete opposite. The research says things do not get better naturally over time. And that's why we have to intervene, because the research supports that things don't get better. And then we deal with all of the things of a sedentary lifestyle as an adult. So if things aren't going to naturally get better, that's where intervention is so important. Often our kids get stuck in those immature movement patterns because learning new movement patterns are so hard for dyspraxic children. And so that's where things don't just naturally get better just because children get older. I work with an adult with autism and dyspraxia, and he has described to me his experience a lot. And he tells me starting movements is what's so hard for him. So he says once he starts, he's got it and he can stop. But starting, and I mean little things, so picking up his toothbrush every single time is a struggle. So he's battling with it in his head. So I think these are the things we need to understand, that just because time has passed and our children become adults, they're still dealing with these same struggles.
Yes, it doesn't mean that they are growing old and it would diminish. It is staying within them. So thanks for sharing such an insightful words which you just said, Dr. Joni. And I would like to know, what are the strategies or interventions you at your clinic typically use to address these impacts of the posture, gait, balance, and coordination, all the issues together in dyspraxic people, even though they are like adults or even the pediatric population?
So we kind of take a two-prong approach, because one piece is I like to work on what is the source of the problem and breaking that all down. So we want to improve things so that the body can move more automatically. But at the same time, we also want to give modifications so kids can participate in things now. So we don't want to wait either. So we like to do modifications, like if a child can't ride a bike, and using kind of the chunkier wheels is going to get them out riding a bike with friends. So that's an example of kind of a modification or accommodation that we're going to do right now. The bigger piece for me is, I always say I want to teach a child how to fish versus give them that fish. Can I support their body to learn how to do things more automatically so they don't have to think about it? So there's kind of three main areas that I look at and that all of our therapists will look at with these kids. So one is, do they have equal postural movement in all directions? Because if they don't, they're not learning their midline, they're not getting accurate sensory information around them. So we really look at that postural mobility. And then the next piece is, okay, our movement patterns are there. We have equal movement in all directions, but now is it active? So am I breathing with diaphragmatic breathing in all these positions, or am I holding my breath? A lot of our kids will hold breath for stability. It's a great short-term solution. It only helps you for a couple seconds. You got to breathe again, and then you lose your balance. So making sure our kids are using their whole inner core, and then working on strengthening those pieces once they have the mobility and things are active. I also like to work on the motor planning piece and combining it with the sensory and motor using a treadmill. So I really like using all visual motor activities on the treadmill. So they're getting intensity, they're getting rhythm, they're getting movement, they're getting vestibular stimulation. And I like to do a lot of visual activities or using a mirror on the treadmill. So we are using our eyes. We can do a lot of dual task training at the same time. We're using our eyes, we're using our brain, we're using our whole body for moving in a way that we move throughout the whole day. So doing it with walking, but also an intensity where it can then carry over. So I use the treadmill a lot for our dyspraxic kids to really work on getting things as automatic as possible and bring in both the sensory systems and the movement systems and the cognitive piece all at the same time.
Wow, Dr. Joni, this was very insightful. I think we, as a physical therapist, me and Divya also would like to incorporate these strategies in our sessions from today, actually. Thank you so much for sharing this valuable information with us. And we would like to know a little more about the importance of early interventions from you to like about the posture, gait, balance, and coordination. What is the impact of the early intervention in these things?
Absolutely. So early intervention is so important because, as we said, a lot of these movement patterns are not going to just spontaneously change on their own. And the longer you're using a certain pattern, the harder it is to change it. So when the children are younger, it is so much easier to introduce new ways of moving. And the body often likes it. The body likes efficiency. The body likes to breathe better. So the body will incorporate these changes, but the sooner the better, because it is just, they say it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. It is really hard to teach new movement patterns when a child's been moving the same way for years and years and years.
Yes, they'll have this. We'll have to develop new movements with the neural plasticity, and developing that actually will take a long time for us. As you said, it will give us some challenge, but then still there is a hope that we can develop that. So that's a really good question, Manisha. And lastly, as we are coming to the end of it, I have one more question for you, Dr. Joni. So in your experience, what are some effective ways to support the individuals with dyspraxia to improve their overall life quality and movement skills, like overall?
I think the biggest thing is having the understanding of where the challenges are coming from and make sure that everyone who's supporting the child or the adult also understands where the challenges are coming from. It goes back to what I said earlier on, is that assumption it's a behavioral problem. That often causes more problems than anything else, because if you're struggling to do a daily activity and everyone's assuming you're just not trying, that's where that impact is even stronger on self-esteem than just struggling with getting it done. It's the people's perceptions around you. So I really think the most important thing is to acknowledge, whether it's from the parent, the teacher, the caregiver, to acknowledge what the struggles are, and to, as you're doing interventions, to communicate with the child why you're doing it and engage them in the process. Does this make it easier? Does it not? Let's say you tried a sensory intervention. Does that feel better? Does that not? Does it help you focus? Engaging our children, because that empowers them moving forward to try things that, does going for a walk in the middle of your class can you come back and now you can focus better? But if we don't tell them why we're doing what we're doing and we don't ask them if it's helping, then they're not kind of checking in with their own bodies. They're not building their interoception, which is a whole nother topic we didn't even touch, but they're not kind of, listening to their bodies, building their awareness. The biggest thing to me is for everyone to understand where the challenges are coming from, talking to the child or adult about it and engaging them in the process.
There's another question that I would like to know. So how do you deal with the non-verbal dyspraxic child when you have all these challenges, when they cannot communicate? Like, how do you use your strategies for them?
Strategies. I just have different accommodations for our children who aren't speaking. One thing I do a lot of, and this I've learned from working very closely with a speech therapist, I'll do a lot of giving a script of what we're doing. So what I found, it really helps with executive functioning. And it also helps from communication because they're trying to organize their thoughts of whether it's from the motor plan or the communication. So I will do a lot of a script of what we're doing, but from the first person. So I step up, then I get the object, now we're walking, but it's just giving them that piece. It really supports their executive functioning. And the biggest thing for our children who aren't speaking is just presuming competence, presuming they're understanding everything you're saying and listening to them, their nonverbal communication, listening to what they're telling you, acknowledging what they're feeling. And that's where, building that rapport, that connection with them is so important because they are understanding us, even though they can't communicate with speaking, and really working with the speech therapist with whole communication. We use devices. I have children that will type. I have children that use pictures, all sorts of things, gestalts. That's something that I've learned a lot about over the past couple of years. I have children who are communicating through scripting. I have a child who she scrolls through Bubble Guppies videos and will communicate appropriately with the transcript of a Bubble Guppies video. So presuming competence, because these kids find ways to communicate that are often brilliant, and it's our job to just really listen.
Yeah, all we have to do is listen. That actually adds up 1,000 words.
Dr. Joni, when I was listening to your answers, this one question came to my mind. So when you're working with children with dyspraxia and they're not able to understand at all the movements which you are trying to make them do, so then how do you support them? What kind of different strategies do you bring it in to give them the idea on that how do they have to motor plan and ideate their movement and successfully convert it to some kind of outcome? So what kind of strategies do you bring into helping them with the ideation of the movement?
So there's a few kind of different directions to go. I'd say the top one is looking at, from a sensory perspective, what can we enhance where they're going to be getting more information and then help them plan it out. So we can use something weighted so that they're getting more information into their bodies. Yeah. Sometimes it's more of a prepping first. So we'll use the vibration plate or spin board if we need to prep that vestibular system. I do a lot of things on the treadmill because it is moving you. So you only have to respond. And so that often will trigger a lot of initiation because you're already going. So it's also breaking things down is kind of another angle. How can you break it down further? But how can you look at their strengths? So I will often look at, okay, they don't have one skill, but what's a skill they do have? And then how do I build off of that? So I can add some novelty into the skill they have to be building off of that instead of starting from scratch.
Other than vestibular, so do you address tactile system also to give them that initial plan? As you said that starting the movement is difficult for them. Any particular strategy can be followed to facilitate that starting movement and then they take it over?
And you have
So-
anything like specialized in that?
Yeah, so there's a few different things I use. So sometimes I'll use the scripting what needs to be done step by step. That
Okay.
seems to support the children executive functioning wise a lot. Also, just if we're stuck, we don't just stay there. So we walk away, we come back. So that it gives you a do-over, because if a child's stuck and they have a hard time starting, just keep trying to start. Their brain is almost just stuck in the same loop. So we go away, we try it again. Certain word patterns will sometimes trigger it. So a ready, set, go, a 1, 2, 3, sometimes things like that are enough to kind of get it started. So little things like that, sometimes a song too, little things that can kind of get a connection. So if you're alerting different parts of the brain. So if you go to the direction of singing a song, and I'll turn anything into a song. We're walking over here, we're walking over here. Anything you want a child to do, you can turn it into a song, and it accesses a different part of the brain. So a lot of our kids, they get stuck in a little loop of where they're going, and we don't want them just like, banging against the door. We have to like find a different way. So if we do it through music, sensory enhancement, sometimes little phrases, doing that scripting to create that executive functioning support is often helpful.
Okay, that is great. All the strategies which you have given are very, very helpful. And we will definitely start using them with our clients also. Thank you, Dr. Joni.
So as we are almost in the end, on the behalf of PlayStreet team, I would like to convey a heartfelt thanks to you, Dr. Joni, for taking your time out to share your valuable experience, insights, and your expertise for us today. So your perspectives have added a valuable depth for understanding on this topic of impact of dyspraxia in posture, gait, balance, and coordination. So to all our viewers, we hope you found this interview very insightful and knowledgeable. If you have any questions or would like to share your thoughts, feel free to connect with us.
At PlayStreet, we offer a special program called Dyspraxia program, which include intensive occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy, upbeat, and co-regulation. If you feel that your child has dyspraxia, please be free to contact us for the further details regarding this program. Thank you once again for being part of this conversations, Dr. Joni, and all the audience over there. Have a nice and wonderful day. Thank you.